Welcome to the Combative Nerds Podcast. Join us while we break balls and try to outwit each other at every turn while debating all things nerdom and trying to make sense of this world. Look, I'm not gonna lie, this is a Herculean task and I'm not sure we have enough brain power to do so. At the very least, we can laugh and offend each other through the process. Thanks for sharing your day with us. Now on to our show. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Raiderlance and
Not Maggot.
So we decided to record today. We're kind of doing a rush job because a lot of new information came out regarding Andrew Tate and his current legal woes. I'm not going to say our first episode where we discussed it got undone, but it would have been nice to have some of this information going into that podcast. But
no kidding.
Yeah, with the current access to information with the internet, things are going kind of fast and we're trying to keep up. So we appreciate it. Let me do some housekeeping. Please like, subscribe, help us out any way you can. We're a new startup. We could use any encouragement, any comments, any suggestions. We would appreciate them all. So now, I'm assuming if you clicked on this, you were expecting a video. I apologize. I'm old. We're trying to tune up. We're trying to get some new technology. I'm trying to learn video editing. So it will be coming in the future. But don't click away. We got some good information for you. So please try to stick around, listen to this. And if not, go listen to the first one. This is Raiderlance. I am a licensed attorney, so I have a little bit of a different perspective on this, and I'm going to try to look at it objectively. Not Maggot, my friend. What's your approach in looking at all this stuff?
I'm just kind of the average Joe at this point. I want to approach it objectively, but it's very difficult to do that as a human being, to be frank.
Because of the emotions involved or the biases?
Well, I mean, just kind of moral compass, right? I mean, my moral compass isn't necessarily for everyone, but on the same token, I can't completely take myself off of my own moral compass. Not to say that mine's always pointing true north, but I do have to, take my thoughts, emotions, experiences, and some of the things that are said. It's like, okay, you can look at it and say, we were talking about this previously. You may agree with something that he said. The problem is, and this is something that I would challenge you and anyone else to, is considering the context for the things that we're getting ready to discuss. At the same time, when he's making some of these statements, he's doing some of these things that we're going to be reviewing. And it's very difficult to disconnect what potentially could be what he's saying versus what he's actually doing and how he's actually treating people. And that's a challenge.
Yeah. So let me do a short little recap of the last episode. It was primarily me talking, and I made a couple contentions. And the primary contention was, I think Andrew Tate at best is an 80-20 situation. 80% charismatic, smart, entertaining, 20% poison. Now, we all know that he's playing a character when he's on the mic, and he's of course acting a little bit different off the mic. But now we're getting, with all this information, exposure to how he conducts himself behind the mic. And I was a little surprised by some of it because, I would admit it, I was an Andrew Tate fan. I listened to a lot of his content. Of course, I disagreed with a lot of it. I did not like some of the spins or the way he would style it, as he would say. But in general, I was an Andrew Tate fan. I was a fan of the pro-masculinity messaging. My contention was, if you're going to listen to Tate, you got to offset it with some other perspectives, some opposing perspective to kind of round out his edges, because he can't be 100% right. And I also suggested there may be other mediums that would be better, that wouldn't have that same amount of poison. So I'm going to propose a question, and it's a moral question. Of course, I'm an American attorney. I'm going to believe in innocent until proven guilty. But let's say he did what he did. I'm going to ask a question. Should this be a crime? Now, according to the allegations, that's a pretty bold question. Human trafficking, because of the YouTube algorithm, we got to say grape, being part of a criminal organization. What I'm specifically challenging is whether or not the lover boy method of human trafficking should be a crime. Now, I know what I believe. I'm asking you as a listener, because I am going to make the contention that a lot of males don't think that should be a crime because they oscillate or they have trouble with the intent factor in that alleged crime. They think that the, I guess you would call them victim, is not really a victim because they knowingly and willfully engaged in this exchange. Meaning, okay, let's say Andrew Tate did all this stuff. He had the riches, He made the promises. The girl knew what she was getting into. She knew that she was coming to share in the riches, and she knew that he would never be faithful. So you can't really say that he fooled her. Therefore, the question is, should this be a crime? I think we should get into the specifics of what actually happened. And then after that, we need to look at it subjectively. Here's what I mean. You look at all the facts, you look at the allegations, you look at what is defined as a crime objectively. Then you put yourself in the situation and you see if that changes your analysis. So everybody thinking that this shouldn't be a crime, if this actually happened, what if it was your sister? What if it was your cousin? And that's the way the male brain works, right? Now all of a sudden you get a little bit protective now that you changed it. So I need you to keep all these facts in mind. Again, a Tate fan, agree with most of his message. I previously said if he's guilty of this stuff, fuck him. Not because I think he's inherently evil, but because he straight up broke the law and wasn't being on the high ground while doing it. So, Not Maggot, you ready for me to share a couple additional facts with you?
Yeah, sure. So, but before we jump in real quick,
yeah,
from a attorney perspective,
okay,
what is the most difficult thing to prove in court?
I understand what you're saying. Okay.
I would argue it was intent, because intent is the hardest thing, because you can easily prove means and motive, right? And if you got means, motive,
Sure.
intent, or opportunity, like it's harder to show intent. And that's usually, unless there's a legal proceeding issue, right? That's usually the most difficult thing. And that's usually what ends up getting a charge lessened. Am I
Sure
correct?
You are not wrong. I'm looking at it from an evidentiary standpoint. So it was kind of a curveball. There's two ways to answer it. You can't prove something just through circumstantial evidence unless there's a massive amount, right? So it's easy.
Right.
Everybody wants a smoking gun. That's easy. If you don't have it, it gets really hard that, oh, this person saw them at that time. That person said this. But in general, I would agree with you. Intent is the hardest because how do you truly know what's in somebody's mind? Polygraphs, everybody wants to do a polygraph. They're not 100% accurate, man. It is a loose science at best. And you got some crazy people who can believe what they're saying. So I would agree with you. In general, intent is the hardest part. Now, specifically in this case now, I got to be right off the bat. There are some attorneys online. I'm not a criminal attorney. Let me make that caveat. There are attorneys online saying, well, this is what human trafficking, these are the elements. They're talking from an American perspective. I don't know from a European or specifically a Romanian legal system. I looked it up for like a half an hour last night. I also can't read Romanian, and Google Translate kind of sucks. There are specific statutes, so I will obviously defer to what they say and their critical elements. In the American legal system, it's comprised of three elements: acts, means, purpose. So I would, in general, agree with you that proving Andrew Tate's intent is very hard because you're trying to extract something from his mind unless you have evidence of what he was thinking and what he was doing. And that's what we're going to get into. So it might not be as hard in this case.
And the fraud that they are specifically charging him with is not related to the fraud that he was committing while webcamming. The fraud that they are trying to pin on him is specifically related to the lover boy method to get the women so that they could then go and catfish men and bamboozle them out of money.
Yes. There's a lot of fraud involved of what's been going on here, allegedly. Either way, let's go into the facts because it's more, I don't want to say too much of my opinion. I want the listener to hear the facts and make up their own decision. Again, I can't say I'm anti-Tate. I agree with too much of what he says. I can't say I'm anti-sex trafficking and human trafficking, right? But what we need to look at is what he actually did. We have some pretty concrete evidence now. And then we got to ask the question, should it be a crime? People don't want to ask it. People saying, obviously, I don't know, man. There's a lot of people clearly. Did you know they're actually rioting in Romania at one of his mansions against the police? They're having like their own little mini movement where police are getting called out in riot gear.
Are the protests to free him or to just murder him in town square?
No, free him.
He's not even Romanian. Why do they care?
He has that many devoted followers. People believe. Hate him if you want. He's done some good. It sucks. It's not black and white. This sucks. Bad people do good things. Good people do bad things. That is a harsh reality that When you get older, you will learn and it will crush you. You will have to come to understand, and not you specifically, not Maggot. I'm talking to the audience here. It's just a part of growing up where you will face that disappointment. And then you're left with the challenge of, all right, do I throw everything out, not listen to anybody and create my own stuff? Do I take the good, but excise the bad? Do I throw the baby out with the bathwater? Right? There's no doubt this man has done good. And with the facts coming out, there's less of a doubt that he did wrong.
Yeah. But to your point, the question is are the parts greater than the sum?
Yes.
And is that possible, right? Is it possible
Right.
to carve out some of those things, especially, kind of the same thing that I mentioned to you is it possible to take a good part of what he's saying, albeit polarizing the way he says it,
Sure.
That sort of
Sure.
thing. But if that statement, which may on its own not carry much quote unquote hatred or anything like that, but if it was rooted in things that he was doing to commit these crimes,
Yeah.
at what point do you say there's rot from within at that point?
Yes.
Right. And then maybe it's like, okay, well, you can throw out that good statement, but the essence may not necessarily be wrong because Jordan
Sure.
Peterson also said it, or Ben Shapiro also said it, or some other.
Sure.
Right. So, if Gandhi says it and you're ready to throw it out because Tate said it,
Yep.
it's like, well, where did the original source come from? Maybe I should go to that and not this other person.
I have an analogy for that. I was talking about my wife about this whole conversation, and her argument was that, yes, but when Andrew Tate says it, it's a manipulation. He doesn't mean it for the purpose of that statement or helping people. And I said, okay, I understand what you're saying. And here's what I mean. When a man is apologizing to the woman, what does he do for her in general, at least for the American culture?
Grovels and buys her shit.
Buys her shit, typically flowers, right? So you see a man approaching your door with flowers, more likely than not, it's for an apology or Valentine's Day, right? So here's the thing. When a man wants to manipulate a woman, even if he's not sorry, he can just buy her flowers. How do you distinguish the two? The guy who's actually sorry versus the guy who just knows it means I'm sorry, so that she'll think he's sorry, so that they can move on.
The next action.
That's the appropriate way to do. But the way people are reacting so emotionally, they want to ban flowers. You understand what I mean? You just can't throw everything out with it. You need to figure out the intent, look at the whole picture. This is not necessarily the Matrix attacking Tate. Tate got his hands dirty. I don't care whether you think he's guilty or not. I don't care if you think it's a crime or not. His hands are freaking dirty. And if you will listen a little bit longer, we will lay out some of the stuff. Not my research. I would have to give Abba and Preach their YouTube channel. If I had the technology, I'd be doing what they do. I don't. So I'm having to rip all of their edited videos for the sound bites. So thank you guys. I owe you. I'll fly down and wash your car if I need to. But we got to look at the stuff, man. We're not theorizing anymore. There's some concrete stuff. All right. So let's get into it. Okay. From the last episode we did with Tate, there was a quote that I could not validate or I could not authenticate. It was in a news article, but they said, oh, it was a deleted post. Well, they were incorrect. And I read something where they identified where that quote was. And that quote was referencing him in writing, laying out his method. Well, Googling all this stuff, there is a blogger, pretty famous, pretty salacious. His name is Perez Hilton from PerezHilton.com. From the Smile Not Maggot, I'm sure he's heard of him. Okay, I'm not saying this is reputable. Go ahead.
He's definitely he's had his name attached to quite a few things that have come out over the years. So while it may not necessarily be reputable, it is not necessarily the Onion. So
right,
it's not it's not reputable at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's probably the smoke where there's smoke, there's fire to be assumed here.
I would agree. And when there's screenshots, there's proof. So he had a couple screenshots to prove it as well. So
and he's got enough money that if it's faked, he's going to get lambasted for it. So he's not going to post something that can't be, at least partially authenticated.
Yeah. So under Perez Hilton's research, he said that Tate had something called the Ph.D. program, which is now defunct and now gone. It was a website. And on that, Andrew Tate would do like a little blog post on it, a little bit of advertising, and there's screenshots on it. So you can go to PerezHilton.com if you want to check it out. Okay, so let's get to the exact quote of what Andrew Tate had up on this website for the Ph.D. program. And I quote, "How did I become rich? Webcam. I've been running a webcam studio for nearly a decade. I've had over 75 girls working for me, and none of my models is different than 99% of webcam studio owners. Over 50% of my employees were actually my girlfriend at the time. And all of my girlfriends, none were in the adult industry before they met me. Then he says, my job was to get the women to fall in love with me. Literally, that was my job. My job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, test her if she's quality, get her to fall in love with me to where she'd do anything I say, and then get her on the webcam so we could become rich together. Whether you agree or disagree with what I did with their loyalty, submission, and love, for me, doesn't matter. You can reject the insults, and the results are simple. My girlfriends would do more for me than 99% of men's wives would do for them. Direct quotes off that website that was taken down with screenshots. What do you think about that?
It sounds a whole lot like, the definition of abuse of power and taking advantage of an individual. But he's saying that the ends justify the means because I wanted to get rich.
I wanted to get us rich, right? You gave her
Yes,
share, right?
it's the royal we, right? And as long as you give her some of what she's gotten, right? But you take the dealer's cut. We split it evenly. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Then the ends justify the means. How much? And I think that there's some additional piece to this that I think is important to consider. And you have some of these direct quotes as far as the percentage splits that I think is important when you're talking about how we react to this.
Sure. Back to your question about intent. If they can attribute those words from his website with screenshots, he has some splaining to do. You know what I mean? That directly shows his intent and motive.
Yeah. How do you prove intent? Well, it helps if you have a direct quote.
Exactly. Followed by actions, right? And then he followed up on it. He didn't say that behind a mic. He didn't say that in an interview. You can't slap a satirical label on that. Those are just plain words. Plain words are always left up to interpretation. There's no body language. There's no pitch and tone to smooth it out somehow for him. Those are just his words.
And it wasn't just once.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that. So that was what I found probably about January 4th. Now, January 7th, we got an update that Andrew Tate, while in custody, had to be taken to the hospital. They couldn't say exactly what it was. There was one website that referenced that it was some nodule in his lung, but it wasn't too big of a deal. That hasn't been proved. I haven't heard anything else. Also said that a lot of his cars, 10 properties or pieces of land owned by his company and registered to the Tate brothers, had been seized by the investigation. So, and then, a lot of his cars were taken. So that was on January 7th. Now, as of January 12th, we got a lot of new information. Apparently, the Romanian legal system, officials, prosecutor are leaking evidence to the press, which is bad. Don't do that. Why they would do that, you can theorize it. Oh, these people want to win. The Matrix is against them. I will agree with no hesitation. You should not be leaking this evidence. You are going to mess up the chances of this guy to have a fair trial. Now, that is an American idea. I have no idea with the Romanian judicial system, what they're going to do with this mess and these prosecutors who are leaking. I don't see how you get a fair trial out of that. Now, from my understanding, there is no such thing as a fair trial in Romania. It's just how much you can pay. So, I can't really speak on that. But from an American legal perspective, shouldn't be leaking information. But for my personal selfish perspective, it's very valuable because I get to have this conversation with you and talk about it. So we have a couple videos. Again, thank you to Abba and Preach, who actually took them from a different attorney who's a criminal attorney. I want to take a little side about this. The criminal attorney who compiled all this information, not Maggot, did you see him on the video a little bit?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that he is a pretty good representation of a real life Better Call Saul?
Yeah. Something tells me that he is, I don't know the guy from Adam. It's just, it puts you in an interesting light when you are the one that's putting this information out there and reviewing it, kind of like we are. But we're not asking for someone. We're not hoping that someone hires us at the next legal issue they have. I'm just some guy.
I'll say good for him. I guarantee he's more successful than I'll ever be. He's also a lot slimier than I'll ever be. Good God, he embodies what I do not like in attorneys. And I'm not talking just about the way that he dresses. It's like put lipstick on a pig, man. That guy. Maybe he's a good, nice guy. I just can't. I can't roll with those type of guys.
It's the people that you see on advertisements during Judge Judy or one of the other daytime television shows. They just scream used car salesmen, or as we used to affectionately call them, ambulance chasers.
Yep, exactly. Now, more importantly, if this guy is sighing, rolling his eyes, and shaking his head, that tells you something, right?
Yeah.
That if he's being like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe all this evidence, it's a bad sign. That's all I'm saying.
I think he's just happy that he's not having to be the defense attorney here. He's like, God, I'm so glad I'm not the public defender or someone that he hired to defend him.
You know what's sad? That's not true, because all he cares about is a retainer. And it would be a big retainer in this one.
Oh, yeah. They would burn through hours.
Yeah, my point is this guy is... Ugh.
We can knock him, but he did some work for us so that we can do this. So, we'll give him that.
He did. I'm sure he's an amazing attorney. All right. So let's get into some of the things that Andrew Tate said. So I'm going to pull up some videos. You're going to hear it in the background because I am not tech savvy enough to be able to incorporate video into it. All right. So here's the first video of Andrew Tate admitting to a webcam operation and basically acknowledging that he's a pimp. Here we go.
When you say webcam company, people assume, oh, it's just a sex fest. But in reality, it's a shitload of people management. The HR category of the webcam business is the largest and most important thing. You're effectively taking girls, teaching them how to make unlimited money from home, and then making sure they give it all to you. Your goal is to inspire a girl to make money. So the way you're going to do that is you have to have some element of influence. And you're going to have that element of influence through her respecting you, looking up to you, and her believing she needs you. And this is extremely important because at the beginning, she will need you, but then she won't need you. But you have to keep that fallacy, keep that dream alive.
All right. So what do you think?
It just sounds terrible. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's just like, we're going to teach someone how to make money and then manipulate them. He didn't say manipulate. I will. Manipulate them into giving it all to you, as opposed to being completely outright and saying, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do this to make passive income, or semi-passive income, right? And it's going to cost you X number of dollars to learn it, but I'll waive that upfront fee, the education fee, right? I'll waive that fee on the beginning and instead take a higher percentage so that eventually you do get to pay back, right? Like, it's not a loan agreement. It's not anything other than just straight manipulation of an individual and then an ongoing manipulation to take that money and extract it from them.
I mean, I would agree with you. I focused on a little bit of a different aspect. Of course, coming from an attorney's perspective, what attorneys are basically doing is they're trying to get widgets and put them into pegs, if that makes sense. Does this element fit? Does that element fit? Can I use this for intent? Can I use this for act? Can I use that for purpose? Can I use that for means? And so you're just basically trying to categorize all this evidence. Now, this statement shows that he calls it a fallacy, right? So that's a misconception that could be attributable to fraud. He basically sets up a relationship and it alters because she essentially is able to become independent after she learns the business. But now he has to make her rely on him through a fallacy. So that goes a little bit to motive, a little bit to his intent right there. That's the way I look at it. So let's go on to the next one. And in this one, Andrew Tate talks about the psychological aspect of street pimping and how it's similar to what he does.
I knew some street pimps. I've known them for a long time. Straight street pimping is completely... In fact, no, it's not completely different game. The psychological aspect is the same. She can't do this without you to ensure that she doesn't do it without you. At the beginning, she can, but there'll become a point she can't. But you being here, it synergizes this teamwork energy. We're going to do this together. Yeah, you go on the camera. Don't worry. I'll talk to the guys. I'm going to talk to them. We're a team. Happy, positive teamwork. There's no negative energy in this business.
Now, before we discuss that, I should give you context of this since you can't see it. This is not an interview. This is him not being a guest on somebody else's podcast. This is video of him in one of his tutorials, I believe, in one of his educational programs to subscribers. So he is breaking down the game of how he runs his operation, and people are paying him for that information as a mentor-student relationship. So it would be argued, I would argue that this is a more candid, realistic expression of his thoughts and motives, as opposed to him giving an interview where he's wearing his sunglasses and maybe using a little bit more inflammatory language. So that's the context of these videos. Not Maggot. What do you think about what he said here?
I mean, I don't know anything about street pimping outside of what I've learned from watching television.
Yeah, from the little I know, it is a philosophy and lifestyle that transcends the socioeconomic status of the hood or the elite. This is a way to control women in a bad context. Yeah, I said it. There could be good control of women as a father, as a husband, as a brother. There could be a healthy form of it. I would not argue that this is a healthy form of control of your women through pimping.
But it's a team. What are you talking about?
Well, here's the problem, though. At least in the American culture, pimping's okay. It's you call a man a pimp. That's a compliment. No one has a problem with Snoop Dogg. All he did was talk about pimping his hoes, right? Cat Williams was a literal pimp when he was young. He's a great comedian. I think he's actually a pretty good guy. So I think our culture either doesn't have an issue with it or understands that there is a male-female dynamic where you're trying to game each other, right? There's a name for the man side does. For the female side, you got your Cardi B's, you got your this and that, where they talk about running game on guys. You got your sugar babies. They're looked down upon as being promiscuous or maybe not of marriage quality, but they're not considered criminals. So I'm not trying to justify this. I'm just saying that it's a philosophy. I'm just trying to say there is not as much stigma around it as there should be because of the crime and the horrific stuff that happens because of this manipulation of women. So what's your sense of this? I mean, are you pro-pimping, anti-pimping?
So I feel like we look at...
G's up, hose down.
I think we look at it as two different things. Like we look at and say, like pimping, stripping, any one of those things, if a woman chooses to do it, then she's empowered, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
However, when it becomes an abuse of power to force that person into it, or a pimp comes along and abuses a woman physically or emotionally, then all of a sudden we have an issue with it. And rightfully so. So I feel like while it's not necessarily an all-encompassing thing where we say, oh yeah, pimping's fine. I feel like we kind of dress it a little bit and say, pimping's okay over here in this box, but if it comes with these other issues, then it's not acceptable. And those things, we address those specific things that make it unacceptable, but we leave the other part alone, right? We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in this case.
I agree. And to extrapolate upon that, I've heard many artists in the music industry, when they explain it to me, it sounds like they're getting pimped by these music execs. Like, what do you mean you get 10%? You're the one touring, you're the one doing all this stuff, you're the one creating this music, but in the record deal, you're getting how little of a percentage? Disney using all these little kids to, some would argue, at least to South Park, to sell sex to these younger kids in a more acceptable form. Half of these kid actors go insane when they become adults. People are fine with that. It's not hurting Disney's bottom line. So I do think there's a separation in our minds. I'm not saying where it is. I'm not saying where it should be. I'm just saying this philosophy is okay up to a point.
I agree.
Everybody agrees on that. No one wants to say it. So here, when Andrew Tate is talking about this, I might not like it. I definitely wouldn't do it. But everybody shouldn't act like he's a demon for saying this. We have this type of philosophy throughout our culture, and it's acceptable somehow.
Or it has been acceptable. Let's clarify, because what was acceptable back in the 90s, even up into the 2000s with, your Disneys and stuff like that, that's no longer the norm, right? There's still Disney childhood stars and stuff like that, but there's so much less of that now than there was back when Disney was, the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse of live action, right?
Sure.
And so part of that has been changed because of the Me Too movement, because of the things that have come out about Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Those sorts of things have kind of changed the way that we view what is acceptable in our own moral, stratospheres.
Yeah. And again, this statement, I think, does not condemn Tate in and of its own. But of course, he said more. So let's go to the next clip where he talks about using a website called ChatBait. It's also known as chatterbait.com. And there's a payment service processing where it uses cryptos. So here we go.
Another reason you use ChatBait is because they will pay you in Bitcoin. And this is amazing because you've all seen the thought audit shit that's going on. You've all seen the fucking legalities of banking. Trying to get money out of these sites into your bank without paying a shitload of tax is actually very difficult. Because in the last 6 months, ChatBait have released the Bitcoin options. They'll pay you in Bitcoin. Tax is also another important element for controlling your woman. You're not going to pay anybody tax because you're getting paid in Bitcoin.
So there's a lot there. And there's a theme to it, but let's kind of break it up. So one, I'm a fan of cryptocurrency. I own cryptocurrency. There's a big belief out there. I don't want to say it's a misconception, but I would say it's not 100% accurate, that cryptocurrency is used for a lot of organized crime to move money around, to launder money. I'm sure it happens, but the biggest currency that is used to launder money is the US dollar. So I think it's kind of a hypocritical argument to just vilify cryptocurrencies, my own personal bias. But Andrew Tate specifically said, I am using ChatBait so I can get paid in Bitcoin so that I can avoid taxes. His words, not mine. So right there, he has shown a willful intent to commit tax fraud, to commit a crime. I would use that to demonstrate that his character is that of somebody willfully and knowingly able to commit crimes. What do you think, Not Maggot?
So I think there's two parts, right? Because receiving Bitcoin or even buying into Bitcoin, if it's no different than a 401k or like that, you're avoiding paying taxes now, but you get taxed on the withdrawal, right? So when you do eventually withdraw it, if you eventually withdraw it, then there is a tax. So yeah, I get the whole idea of saying, oh, I'm getting Bitcoin, so I avoid paying taxes, which, okay, fine. That proves the character side of it, but it's no different than someone saying, well, I'm investing in GameStop, and when it goes to the moon or whatever, then when I pull it out, you pay on the gain. So yeah, he's avoiding taxes now, but that doesn't mean that he's not necessarily going to be paying them later upon withdrawal.
Possibly.
Hey, I'm just saying from this aspect of it, you're like people are trying to vilify him for that statement. But on the same token, again, I'm not trying to defend him either, but
I agree.
From a semantical standpoint, receiving Bitcoin doesn't mean you're trying to duck taxes.
Yeah. The argument is, and I agree, it's just an argument. I agree with everything you said on a technical point. The argument is Bitcoin is easier to avoid and launder money and not pay taxes on the withdrawal on the back end. Now, if he made a statement that he was laundering money, then that would be bad for him, right?
Yeah, I'd say that would pretty much be a smoking gun.
Yeah. Well, let's hold off on that. Let's go back to the tax part where he specifically says that he's using taxes as a beneficial method of his business operation.
Tax is also another important element for controlling your woman. You're not going to pay anybody tax because you're getting paid in Bitcoin. So you don't need to pay tax to anybody. Tell your girl that you're paying the tax because girls are lazy and girls are stupid and girls don't understand how taxes work. So the girl's working with you and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we made this much money, but I'm going to pay the tax to make sure we don't get in trouble. She'll sit there and go, okay. Now that allows you to do two things. One, it's another control element. If I work with him, my tax is not a problem. If I do it alone, I have to deal with taxes. Taxes are complicated. It allows you to pay her a smaller percentage. So I used to pay my girls 30%. So for every $10,000 they made, I give them 3, and I keep 7. They thought they were on 50%, and I said that the disparity is because of taxes. So you're on 50%, we get to pay the tax first, and then it's 50-50. So really you're paying 30, you tell them you're paying 50, the difference is in the tax. That's where the disparity lies, taxes. If they don't believe you or they want to get fresh or whatever, print out some tax forms. I do this all the time. I just print out some random tax forms and say, yeah, sign here, sign this. What is it? It's for the tax. You want to pay the tax or not? Ooh, okay. And they just sign away. They don't know what fucking signing. Let's throw them away afterwards. But they think something's happening. Something real is happening. Nothing's happening except me get my page.
So what he laid out is that he has a 50-50 agreement with his cam girl. He gets his 50, she gets her 50. However, as an employer, he needs to take out taxes, which he deems to be about 20%. So Tate gets his 50. Allegedly, he's going to go pay his taxes with that 50%. Then the girl gets her 50, but he has to remove 20% for taxes, kind of like anybody who gets a W-2 in America. Your employer withdraws your taxes for you, unless you're an independent contractor. Then I think that's correct. So that 20% he takes out for taxes, he actually keeps. He never pays the tax. He goes to say that he fills out fictitious forms and he throws them away and he uses it as a control tactic. So again, I would point to his character saying that he is lying to a business partner and admitting that he has no intent to pay his taxes. What do you think there?
Yeah, strictly from a United States side of things and someone who gets a W-2.
Right.
When my pay stub says that federal taxes were withheld and state taxes were withheld, my employer has a federal and state fiduciary responsibility to pay those on my behalf.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know what the Romanian system is set up as, but if I'm filing my taxes at the end of the year and I say, okay, this is what my statement says, and the government says, we didn't receive any of this money. Well, the note on my statement is my CYA, because now they know I didn't receive it. Like you said, a 1099 is just straight gross pay,
right,
as opposed to having withholdings in a box, right? So
right.
That's kind of the US system of checking and balancing a little bit. Yeah, you can kind of flub a little bit in your actual return, but ultimately your W-2 is the employer paid me this much. They withheld this much on my behalf based on my tax estimates that I filled out when I put my paperwork in, right? They withheld it based on my dependents and my status and all of that stuff. If there's a differential between that, then I either get a refund or I pay the difference, right?
Right.
I don't know if there's ever, if that same type of parity exists in Romania, but the second piece to that, where he's saying, well, even if a girl is smart and starts asking to see those tax dollars on a form, he's like, well, I just dummy up fake forms. That's fucking fraud. Straight up, that is fraud.
Yeah.
And so, you do have, from just a strict employer fiduciary responsibility, if you are withholding that money for taxes. I don't care if you withhold your business income. That's between you and the government. But if you're taking money from me on my behalf for taxes and you don't pay those to the proper authorities, it's fucking fraud.
You're stealing from me. You're taking food out of my kids' mouths. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone would appreciate that. So I completely agree with you. Let's go to the next clip. All right. So the next one, he talks about why he believes he should be the one sleeping with the cam girl and how it makes for a better relationship than just having a purely business relationship with the girl. Here we go.
You have girls. You cannot do a business relationship with a female. I'll tell you why. Women have sex with somebody. If they're not fucking you, they're fucking somebody else. And that other person she's fucking is going to have the control over her mind as opposed to you. And if he controls her mind and you don't control her mind, once she starts to pick it up a bit after a few weeks, a few months, whatever, and realizes how to make money on her own, or she's going to run off and pay her boyfriend, or then two are going to go traveling in Southeast Asia and she's going to work as she goes, or she's going to go to her boyfriend and say, look, fuck it, you type for me. Oh, yeah, but you're always working. I have to do some traveling and you can't come. I want to bring you with me. Traveling is a great one because the thing about this business is mobile. If you can find a good Airbnb with good internet, you can run it somewhere else. So it's a good little caveat to throw in. You're always working. Why don't you work for me so we spend more time together?
So there's a lot of stuff there. First, I want to get into the fact that this is the second time he's talked about doing the typing for the girl. What he's talking about is the girl does the webcam. She pretends she's typing to the clients, but in reality, there's a ghost typer in the back, typically a guy, because these guys are better talkers to the clients than the females. Now, the client does not know that they are not talking to the actual cam girl. Again, I would point this out as character of being willing to commit fraud or deception. Second, he says, you should be the one having sex with a girl. Because the minute a girl has sex with a guy, a man has some type of control over her mind. So as the owner of the webcam, you should be the one having full control. Next part he brings out is he says that when he's trying to get the girl to come work for him, He suggests it. She, of course, is going to be opposed to it. He says, well, let's just talk about it. Why don't you fly out? Let's talk business. And then he has his, what he calls bottom bitch. What other people are saying is his Lieutenant Angel, his version of Ghislaine Maxwell, be the seller, be the closer, makes the pitch to the girl because it goes over better female to female than male to female.
You're always working. Why don't you work for me so we spend more time together? Work for you doing what? So a lot of webcam business. Oh, I don't want to do that. So, okay, I know you don't want to do that, but listen, come to the meeting. Let's talk. Don't do it. Fine. But let me explain it to you properly. In fact, I'll bring one of the girls who works for me. Your bottom bitch, the new girl, you go out for fucking a nice dinner. Your bottom bitch is the one who does the selling. You don't do the selling. The girl has to hear from the girl. And this is why your bottom bitch has to be trained. That's why I said it's so important to have a good first girl.
Not Maggot. What do you think?
Knowing everything that's transpired previously, right? From, the closest analogy with Ghislaine Maxwell, seeing the depths of that and also what's transpired, it's difficult to separate previous experience with this, right?
Yeah.
But that's part of it. The deception piece, right? The catfishing, if you will, right? Like you're catfishing people, you're catfishing guys and girls on a webcam. I don't know how many people do it.
Sure.
I'm sure he's probably not the only one.
Oh, no.
But the bringing the first girl, right? It just, as I'm listening to it and I was reading through this, I'm like, if I were to put another term to that, I'd put grooming, right?
Yeah.
Like we talk about this from an adult to a child, right? And there's this thing that they call grooming, which is basically kind of continuing to move that line and try to basically kind of keep the person, the child, in the case of grooming is usually referred to as children. In those instances, it's oftentimes to basically kind of work your way closer to them, being that confidant, being that person, so that when you start committing more heinous crimes, more heinous acts that quite frankly are just terrible, the child does not feel like they have anywhere else to go, right? Or they feel like what's happening is their own fault or anything like that, right? It keeps them locked.
Yeah. It is weird. And I am not defending grooming. I am absolutely not defending grooming. But I will say this dynamic is not just for bad things. How many of us have heard people are being groomed for upper management? How many people have heard the term somebody's being groomed to take over the family business? Now you might say, well, that's completely different. Yet the end result, the horrific nature of what the end result is extremely different. What I'm talking about, a psychological dynamic that all humans understand of setting something up, to making something go over. How many times have you had a friend go talk to another friend to convince them? This is a human dynamic that is used in all facets. I don't know necessarily if the tactic he's using as a sales pitch is that horrible by having a girl come and pitch it to this other girl. What I will say is that when you attribute that it's going to be getting a girl to go into the sex industry, which no matter who you are, that is a much different than convincing someone to buy a car or to sign a contract, right? It is inherently exploitive. And I think we can all somewhat agree at that standard. And if you can't, you still think, nah, she knew what she was getting into, then I gotta part ways with you respectfully on that one. But I think we shouldn't get hung up with the way he pitched it. I think we gotta again focus on him pitching it this way, but knowing that he's going to not pay her full taxes, that he's probably going to try to avoid his own taxes, that he's going to be using her admiration and love for him as another leverage point to get her over into selling her body, which she may have not been willing to, but for her love and the sales pitch. That kind of makes sense?
I think, again, we've said this multiple times. What he's presenting is not revolutionary information. Use word of mouth advertising to grow your business, right? How many times on TikTok is somebody talking about selling feet pics or going on OnlyFans, right? So, and the beauty of that is that on OnlyFans, you can use fast internet and an Airbnb, right? Again, he's not bringing anything new to the equation. He's just packaging it up into a business that ultimately exploits people. And that's where, again, we have that an OnlyFans is okay. Word of mouth advertising, that's acceptable. In fact, it's the fastest way to grow, which is why we need you to like, comment, and subscribe.
Nice.
And also, but again, we're going through all these things, and it's like, okay, that's not bad. Grooming a manager to be a senior manager is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
yes,
all of this points back to the intent, and we judge intent based on outcome.
Yes. And whether it's illegal, right? It's codified into law. Look, there are laws I disagree with. I don't care if it's codified or not. I didn't vote for that law. I think I should be able to do that, right? I think that there's certain crimes that are on the books, and I don't think the penalties are enough. I don't think that person should only get 10 years for that. Why are they still taking up our air? But if you want to be part of a civil society, you're going to kind of have to agree to certain societal norms. Unless you want to be the rebel or if you want to become a politician and change the world. Hey, good on you. But in general, you kind of have to accept the laws and the social structure that you're at. Otherwise, you leave or you change them. And here, it's clearly defined that human trafficking via the lover boy method is illegal. That's, jaywalking. You might not like it, but if you jaywalk, you don't get a ticket in America, depending on, the jurisdiction or the locality that you're in.
If you get caught.
Yeah, if you get caught. It is what it is. We are going to actually end it here, and we're going to break this up into part 2 because we got so much more to talk about. So, you ready to join me for a part 2 and we'll go a little bit longer, brother?
Hell yeah.
All right. If you guys are willing to listen, we are willing to talk. Catch you later. Bye.
Peace.
That's it. That's our show. Join Not Megan and myself for part 2 of this episode where we discuss even more leaked evidence in the Andrew Tate case. Please do us the favor and like, subscribe, share this podcast so we can get some traction. Once I get around to it, check us out on our socials. Combative Nerds on Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You know the deal. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you next episode.